Hey everybody, Amanda here. I hope you are enjoying this season of Attach Your Resume. I know I am. I'm so excited to bring you an interview today with not a CEO, but a CCO, Chief Creative Officer of Mythical, which is overall Mythical Entertainment. It's spun out of Rhett Link's YouTube channel, which began back on my YouTube days in the late 2000s. And she's been at the company for 12 years. She helped grow it from being the only employee, apart from a fellow editor, to a company that employs over 100 people. And so I was so excited to talk with Stevie about the process of going from a producer of one show as a part-time gig, what turned into Good Mythical Morning, into being the CCO of a multi-million-dollar company in charge of all kinds of people and figuring out what it's like to grow your career as a creative professional and a management professional in a creative field all at the same time. It's also very cool to end Pride Month with a fellow LGBTQ executive in digital media. So I really hope that you enjoy this interview with Stevie Levine. And remember, folks, you can watch a free video version of this interview over at Attach Your Resume's free Patreon. Going over to patreon.com/attachyourresume. Okay, enjoy. Stevie Levine, welcome to Attach Your Resume. Thank you so much for sitting down with us. My first question is, did you design the set behind you to match your own hair? Because as the Chief Creative Officer, I think that would be allowed.
Yes. As you'll notice, all the sets match me. No, but actually my partner designed a lot of the sets that exist at Mythical. And so this was one that has evolved over time. We do all of our podcasts in this room, and she helped design the background. Maybe she was thinking about my hair.
Just subliminally, if nothing else. I think that's really nice.
Yeah, exactly.
Stevie, the first question we ask all guests on the show is, what is your job? And how do you describe it to people who aren't like in the soup of your field in the day-to-day?
Yeah. I am the Chief Creative Officer at Mythical. It mostly means that anything that has a touch of creative content strategy, branding, anything like that kind of floats up to me. In YouTube terms, you know, if we're going back OG days, I am Rhett Link's producer. But at this point at Mythical, we have about 100 full-time employees with multiple different types of producers everywhere. So depending on who I introduce myself to, I either say I'm Rhett Link's producer, if they're OG YouTube, or I'm the Chief Creative Officer.
And how has the way you introduce your job to people changed as YouTube has become a thing people know way more about? I know you've been working with Rhett Link since 2013, which to me felt like, oh, the YouTube heyday is behind us. Absolutely, it was not. But that's been more than 10 years, which in digital media terms is kind of 30 years, I would say.
Yeah, for sure. You know, in a lot of ways, it hasn't fully changed. I think it depends on the audience that I'm talking to. I said the other day, I went camping with friends, and my friend was like, well, Stevie should really like the place we're going camping because she'll get a lot of good photos for her Instagram, because he, in his mind, believes I am an influencer of some kind, which is not at all the case. So really, it runs the gamut depending on who I'm talking to. Typically, though, I say that, you know, I produce comedy videos. And that seems broad enough for people to roughly understand. I typically count on an 18 to 34-year-old being a part of the conversation, and then it's a little bit easier to say what I do. But make comedy videos is the truth.
For sure. And for that kind of 18 to 34-year-old range, of which I am at the very upper end at this point, Rhett Link is a phrase that you know what that means. But for those who are not as familiar, what is the brief origin story of Mythical as a company?
Yeah. Rhett and Link have been best friends for over 40 years at this point. They met in first grade. They were both held in from recess for writing bad words on their desk. And as a punishment, they had to color in pictures of mythical beasts. So that's the origin of Mythical and of what we call our fans, the mythical beasts. They started making funny videos together before YouTube even existed. They had their own website. And then YouTube came along and people started asking them to put their videos on YouTube. And they were like, we don't need YouTube. We have our own website. But then they did start putting videos on YouTube around 2005, 2006, really way at the start. And they found success there through a lot of big comedic music videos mostly. And when I met them in 2012. They had just moved out to Los Angeles. They had a show on IFC called Commercial Kings that was based on a series of really bad local commercials that they had made purposefully. My favorite being the Red House local commercial. These commercials tend to go viral every other year, even though they're over a decade old at this point. But they came out to make that show for IFC. And then once they were out here from small town North Carolina, they decided we should probably stay out here. We like LA maybe a little bit better than small town North Carolina. And fast forward to 2012, YouTube had a program called the Creator Innovation Program where they were funding content from creators that was pioneering on the platform that was different than what you were seeing at the time. And because what was popular at the time was these kind of short form 3-minute long pieces, Rhett and Link pitched, why don't we do a weekly half-hour variety show? And they were greenlit by YouTube in this program, and they needed to bring on a producer. At the time, they only had one employee that was kind of doing a little bit of everything for them. They were working out of Rhett's converted garage, and I interviewed with them. They brought me on to do the show. And we've gone from that converted garage and the single employee to a 17,000 square foot space with multiple sound stages in Burbank and the 100 employees. And really, the Mythical show, which was the half-hour variety show, combined a bunch of different facets of things that were working at the time and then continue to work today for us. We had music videos. That was the heyday of YouTube where some of our music videos have 80 million views.
Truly.
That doesn't happen for us anymore. We had local commercials. We had comedic guests. We had Key and Peele on. We had Tim and Eric. We had Tony Hale. We had all kinds of fun people that I just cold emailed to come in. And sorry, this is such a long-winded answer, but this is really, I'm bringing you up.
This is very helpful.
2012 was also when they started Good Mythical Morning, but at the time it was more of a daily vlog. So they would decide as they were coming into the office what they wanted to talk about, set up a single camera, and just talk about that thing.
Very 2012.
Very 2012. And at the time, YouTube was saying, make daily content. We will reward you for making daily content. So they were like, oh, okay, sure. We're going to continue to platform and hold on to these like large major music videos as our core creative, but we'll start making this daily vlog situation.
Yeah. And in many ways, that's a predecessor to things you see now where people will have like a Patreon or a second channel or a streaming outfit where they'll use that to kind of keep in touch with their audience in a more regular way.
Absolutely.
But then they will release the feature film, right? Like once a quarter or even once a year in some cases. And the audience is around for it. In so many ways, this sort of 2012, like I got a daily vlog or die moment that a lot of creators felt was brutal and necessitated a format that had less preparation involved because you had to do it every day. And unlike Rhett and Link, who pitched and received this funding from YouTube to bring in someone like you, many of them were not able to edit it. And then you had like the 11:59 p.m. Edit shot of like, oh, I'm uploading this right now, and sorry guys, this changed.
Absolutely. And second channel is exactly right. I mean, it was Rhett and Link 2 was the URL for Good Mythical Morning. And it really was like almost like a burden at the time. And they also, vlogging was a thing, but they were young men with families. They had wives, they had kids at that point, and they made the decision that we're not vlogging our lives. We're not showing our families. We're not putting our families on the internet. So what can we do other than just talk to each other? And what wound up happening is after the 10, 12 episodes of the Mythical show, they asked me to stay on and continue to make the music videos. And one of the things they asked me to oversee was Good Mythical Morning. And I was like, I'm not into that. I'm not into vlog content. I want to make really premium things. Like, we're making these music videos that still hold up, 12 years later, and the Mythical show that somewhat holds up 12 years later. And luckily they felt the same way. They were not into continuing a vlog. So we took some of the lessons learned from the Mythical show. We made a set and started hiring writers and producers and making Good Mythical Morning into an actual show in 2013. And so you'll see in season 4 that transformation from 2 guys at the desk figuring out what they're going to talk about to 2 guys at the desk who have already figured out what they're going to talk about. And so now, now it's our flagship show, and it went from Rhett Link 2 to Good Mythical Morning and wound up being the thing that propels a lot of the other creative things that we get to do together. But that's kind of the origin story of where Rhett and Link and I kind of combine and form into the mythical that is today.
And so from your perspective, you were a few years out of school with a film, TV, radio production degree. So how did it feel to see a job listing for a YouTube channel? Because we were not calling them digital media companies at the time. What were your feelings, the baggage you were bringing to the room? Were you excited about it? Were you pursuing things in more traditional entertainment?
Yeah, it was. I moved out to LA. I graduated in 2009 and moved right out.
Famously a really good year, just economically.
Well, also a great year to be a young person in traditional, because what wound up happening is I took an executive assistant role at a more traditional TV film production company, and immediately they turned to me as the young person in the room, and they were like, hey, this whole YouTube thing is a thing.
Stevie, you are the young person in the room that people looked at and said, YouTube channel that I just missed on. I graduated in 2014, and so I was the micro generation too late to be that person. Because by the time I was applying to roles, it was oh, we have a social media manager, and that actually means DP and editor of a YouTube channel.
Yeah. So it just really hit at the right time, and so I started, and I wasn't watching creator content or anything at that time, but I started studying it because I was like, okay, if this is my, kind of gateway entry point into becoming a producer, then I am going to become the expert of this thing. So the more that I studied the creators and the content at that time, the more I became interested in that path. And so I left that production company that really, we were making digital series, but they weren't, it wasn't part of the creator industry. And I started producing for creators under what was at the time Collective Digital Studio on more of a freelance per creator type of basis. So I was making major music videos for different creator types. And it was the head of production at the time at Collective that introduced me to Rhett and Link, who were managed by the Collective all the way back in 2012.
So you were seeing producer as the role that you wanted to pursue for yourself in entertainment, no matter what that looked like.
Yeah, I think that I realize it's an unusual aspiration or thing to dream about. It's not really such a dream. It's just kind of I think I might be good at putting pieces of the puzzle together. And I also worked for a year at a company called Mondo Media that does Happy Tree Friends. It's an animation company, but they also got funding from YouTube to do, I believe we did 50 pilots in a single year, 50 animated short form pilots.
Oh my.
It was also part of, I think it was from the same fund, from the Creator Innovation
They had a few different
Fund.
rounds, but similar project.
Yeah. So it was just prior to Rhett Link and the Mythical show. I came on for a year to manage production of these 50 animated pilots.
Wow.
I think the thing that attracted me so much to digital was that there weren't as many rules. Like, you could just make things up. And to me, the reason I was so confident that I could and should be a producer is because a lot of it is like logistical, common sense, A to B to C, make it happen type stuff. And I had, the education of that television, radio, film. So I had an idea of this is what I think it's supposed to be like, but I wasn't like referencing, my production management textbook going like, how do you email to see if Key and Peele will come to your studio, So that was what was most attractive to me. So by the time I was introduced to Rhett Link, I knew very well who they were because they were featured on the YouTube homepage right next to Smosh for a lot, many days. So it was kind of a not a starstruck moment, but I was like, oh, these are YouTubers, and they're really big YouTubers.
Smosh, a company, by the way, that Mythical acquired and later
Yes.
resold and retained a minority stake in, which we will absolutely get to. This is probably the episode of Attach Your Resume where we have mentioned TV the most, both because of your path into the industry, but also because your colleagues, Rhett and Link, also had TV aspirations, tried several times in the mercurial land of television to, sell a series and make one work. And Mythical was also one of the first places that I noticed using things like Nielsen ratings and comparing the work that you do to the broader landscape of traditional entertainment. So I would love to know, where you started comparing the work that you do and valuing and evaluating it alongside television and traditional entertainment, and if that strikes you as something that is unusual or important.
We say that we make television for the internet generation, and I think it's very true. Everything that we make has a goal of being television quality. So if you see any of our programming on a television set, what an old way to say something. If you see a Mythical show on TV, it's going to look like a TV show. And that's always been important to us. And like I said, going back to those music videos from 13 years ago, you can see the same aspirations and everything that we've made. It's very important to us that our CTV viewership is high because it reflects what we're trying to do, which is make television. And I think that in this world where we've been talking for years about traditional and digital merging into one, streamers being kind of this in-between of redefining what television means, broadcast kind of being this iconic thing of the past, cable going away, shrinking, fast channels acquiring a completely new audience and fan base. We're touching all of it. And so when you're speaking to different people, you need to speak their language is how we feel. So that's why we started using the Nielsen ratings to compare ourselves to others. Because when you're talking to a television exec who hasn't opened YouTube, you need to be able to speak their language. And we also feel like a lot of, speaking directly to the Emmys, for example, a lot of award shows, traditional award shows, the impetus of having them in the first place was to reward culturally significant premium programming and entertainment that was being made. A lot of YouTube shows have been at the peak of the cultural conversation for, in our case, over a decade now. So the time is now, but it has been for a while, to finally merge YouTube and YouTube creators into that conversation. It's been done with the Netflixes and the Amazon Primes of the world, and the YouTube app is sitting right next to them on smart TVs. So that's kind of our hope, our pitch, the type of content that we make, and why we like to speak different languages depending on who we're talking to.
How does the prestige of television and Hollywood and traditional entertainment factor into all of that? Because one thing that's really interesting is that the reach of a lot of digital creators and YouTubers specifically outpaces the most popular, TV shows in broadcast on any given night. And yet there is something about getting an Emmy, going on Fallon, right? Like having a show syndicated somewhere that just, to me, feels exciting. I wonder if it has any shine left on that for you.
I think that having an impact on a broadcast level scale means something a little bit different. We have a very broad middle American audience. We have 19.2 million subscribers on Good Mythical Morning alone. We have over 30 million subscribers when you look at all of our channels. Our Live Plus 7 days ratings are comparable to late night. Our 18 to 34 or 18 to 44 range in comparison to all those late night people. You can take all of their stats, combine them and double them, and they still don't reach the audience that we reach. But the guys have been on Fallon 10, 11 times now, and every single time it's felt like a real accomplishment for us to be considered in the same realm as more traditional entertainers. I think, Rhett Link are on record saying that, we released a video last year called We're Done, and the point of the video is that we have spent so much time in development hell on the traditional side, pouring our creative energy into television shows and films that never get made. And if we took that energy and poured it into creative that we can make for ourselves, for our own audience, we feel like that would be a much more productive path to follow. I still believe that's true. So I don't think it's how do we get in the door to pitch the studios that we're good enough to make TV. I think it's we're already making TV. How do we bridge the gap of understanding so that the traditional industry gets that? So I think that's the hill to climb now.
Totally. I would love to talk about the elephant in the room, which is the YouTube discovery algorithm. I don't know if you know this, but podcasters are obsessed with the YouTube algorithm. There's if we just had the algorithm, baby, we'd be as big as YouTube. There's a lot, and I don't have to sidebar about, my particular side of this industry right now. But I would love to know what your relationship is to YouTube as a platform's content priorities. Because again, just put a, kind of fine point on it. As you mentioned, when YouTube prioritizes short form video, they invest in short form video and people kind of scramble to follow the algorithm. And a lot of people that I've spoken with over the years and just friends of mine, it can be really exhausting to pivot constantly to the thing that the algorithm is prioritizing most. So I wonder, as someone who professionally thinks about this every day, what is the impact of YouTube's algorithmic changes on your business? And what is your just relationship to strategizing with or around or in spite of it?
Yeah. Nothing that we do creatively is just plucked out of thin air. I always say that we have a sandbox that we have to be creative in, and it looks different depending on the platform. If it's, a live event, if it's a piece of merch, it's a collab, whatever we're doing, if it's a book we're publishing, if it's a cookbook, if it's a fictional book, whatever we're doing, it has to be strategized within the context that the consumers are consuming it. The same thing is true on the YouTube side. Is it frustrating when we make a really great video and it's the lowest performing of the bunch, and then we make a video that we don't love as much and it gets more views? Absolutely. But the fact that it's been happening since the beginning of YouTube means it's never going to stop happening. And I think that the other thing that we say is which is so hardcore, I don't know, evolve or die. That's true. It's either you're going to meet the challenges of the algorithm or what the algorithm is saying the new audience opportunity is, or you're going to be stubbornly stuck in your ways and you're not going to reach a new audience and you're not going to, be around 12 years later as a show. I think there's many times in our past where we had success with a sub-series on Good Mythical Morning, and we thought, well, we'll just do more of those, and we'll do more like those. And then we thought, if the channel just becomes this one series, this one sub-series that's so popular, at what point is it going to completely die and go away? And so when it comes to the YouTube Shorts of it all, I think that the idea behind it makes sense. Are we sitting over here going, boy, that's fun, let's do more of it, this seems like a good thing to try? No, but we weren't one of the creators that was like, I'm not ever doing short form and that's just not what I do. Because what is that? It's not serving anyone. It's not serving you finding a new audience. I mean, I think that that's the best algorithm on YouTube in terms of finding a new audience at this point. It's also, the amount of content that exists in the world is insane in comparison to what it was a decade ago. So I do think that evolve or die thing is very necessary. And while the algorithm is frustrating, it works to a great extent for a lot of people. So yeah, I think that's the thing. I think honestly, the most frustrating things that happen are, we had a show with YouTube Originals called Buddy System, which is a scripted series. And I think YouTube's gone through a lot of standoffs between its content and creative executives and teams and its engineering algorithm product teams.
Yeah.
And the most frustrating situations have been when they are endeavoring to make, premium scripted content. In that particular example with the YouTube Originals, YouTube Red strategy, which no longer exists and is completely wiped.
At all. And sometimes I feel like I hallucinated those banners at VidCon, but they were there.
Yeah,
there was a big marketing budget for a time.
And then the engineers and algorithm folks who are like, no, the algorithm rules all. We can't market anything to anyone. We can't show people that we have this premium content. That's when it gets really frustrating to me, when it's like, well, can we have a little bit of both? Can we serve the algorithm, but can we curate premium content in a way that's more accessible for people? And I don't think that they have. I don't think either side has officially won that standoff, and maybe it's a case-by-case situation. But from my seat, that's where I'm most frustrated, is not with the algorithm itself, but with the cases in which I don't feel like the algorithm should rule all. And, I don't think everyone feels that way.
Well, in some of these soupy, sticky standoff scenarios, I've watched a lot of food TV recently. Maybe that's why my mind goes to food stuff. How do you determine what is like a blip or a trend and what is a business shifting tide change?
And I keep talking about Good Mythical Morning. We have plenty of other channels, but the reason that I think Good Mythical Morning is such a good case study is because even today, there's not a lot of daily content on YouTube that's consistent in the way that we're consistent. Mm-hmm. So when something shifts, we typically are the first to feel that there's been a shift of some kind. And luckily, we have a great relationship with YouTube and a growing team over there who understands that when we flag something, we are flagging it on behalf of the greater creatordom. But it's very easy for us to take different product features in beta and give feedback based on how they're working for us, just because the amount of content that we pump out and how and where it goes and what kind of content it is. So if there is a shift, we feel it, and we can just immediately see in our data on the back end when something's changed.
So let's talk about data. Let's talk about specialization. One thing that I really appreciated that you spoke with Jack Conte about in his Digital Spaghetti interview with you, which I thought was just so excellent. And shout out to Jack's post-production team. They constantly kill it on videos and clips. He's so good. But you talked a lot about hiring people who have skill sets you need, which is something that I think is so worthwhile. And I really want to get into like the crunchy details of management and hiring, because again, we're talking about YouTube channels, but you are the CCO of a company with 100 employees that does everything from TV to streaming to products to books to podcasts and everything in between, live shows. I'm sure there are a couple different verticals that I'm missing. But I would love for you to talk to me about how you approach hiring, about how you find people who fit at your company, and also specifically on-camera talent, which I know you got into in that video with Jack a little bit. And I just think there's a lot to dig into here. So tell me.
It's interesting because something else that's evolved over time. Obviously, I was doing the majority of the hiring at some point, and now as the team has grown, we have an awesome people and culture department, HR operations department, who handles a lot of the actual seeding of job descriptions and filtering of people. I think the struggle in one sense has been being on the leading edge of a lot of creator industry economy stuff, and having to internally educate and raise people up into executive roles in certain places because that skill set or that role doesn't exist yet. And now we're in a place where it's a little bit better that okay, yes, I can go after a content analyst who's YouTube first, who spends all their time on the back end analyzing data, because that we know what that is now.
That job has existed for more than right now.
Exactly. But still, the pool of people is fairly small. And then if you break down that pool into who fits culturally on our side, and by that I mean who has a curious veracity for getting to the bottom of things. We're a big systems company, but just to give you an example of that role in particular, and there's a team there, but this specific person, every morning I get a Slack at 7:30 a.m. that tells me exactly how that day's episode is performing, the lead title, the thumbnail, the comparison in the top 10, the alt titles, the alt thumbnails, the proposal for refresh at that time. We launch at 3 a.m. Pacific, so 7:30 a.m. is when we start tinkering around with things. And then every 2 hours for the rest of the day, I'll continue to get a report of how that video is doing. We launch multiple videos every day, so those reports will include all those videos. And then also on the social media side, because that person is mostly dedicated to YouTube analytics, we have a counterpart who will also bring through a daily or weekly report about videos off platform in other areas. And they're great at what they do, but they didn't exist 10 years ago for sure. So I will say in a lot of ways, it's become a lot easier to hire people because the roles exist and people want to fill them. I also say we're very grateful to have fans in a sense that have joined us in a professional capacity. And by that, I don't mean, I mean more like people who have wanted to do these things professionally and have admired what we do at Mythical, so that bringing them on isn't so much of an education because in a lot of ways it's been their kind of North Star career wise, which is very flattering and also very helpful when you're looking to bring people on.
Do you have a process for either screening or talking about or making that employee feel comfortable giving feedback to someone who they have been fans of?
Oh, yeah. And I think right away, especially, I guess you wouldn't immediately... I have a lot of different roles in the sense that, if you are a fan of Good Mythical Morning, you know me as the voice of Good Mythical Morning. And that's your entry point for me. But really, I spend the majority of my time in meetings and on calls. And so for a role like that content analytics role, you wouldn't immediately go, oh, that person's going to be interfacing a lot with the chief creative officer of this company, who I know to be the voice of Good Mythical Morning. But I think very quickly, I mean, for her in particular, I was one of the first people to interview her because I was like, I know exactly what I'm looking for in this role. I've worked with multiple people in this role over the past 12 years, and this role is so important to me in terms of content strategy that I need to be the one who's asking these particular questions. And I think the interview portion was like 5 minutes, and then the rest of the call was just like a back and forth conversation about like, when this happens and what would you do? And so yeah, it just, and to your broader question, it just depends on the role. I'm not involved in a lot of the production hiring at this point because I very much entrust that entire team to lead through that process. So if we're bringing on a new editor for something, or a line producer, production coordinator, et cetera, there's no need for me to like additionally weigh in on like, here's my thoughts about this person. But when it's a role that I interact with a lot, I do like to be involved.
I appreciate that your experience and tenure at Mythical spanned a length of time where like you could hire someone as a production assistant or maybe even office assistant, and they may later learn something that they go on to lead a team or a department, which I know has happened lots of times at Mythical from other things that you guys have talked about. And so I would love to know about those moments, about like what are the indicators that tell you that it's time to hire someone who is dedicated to something? And have you run into friction with people? I would imagine particularly creative people saying like, I would imagine as like, I love that you're so into sets, but we need a set designer. Like we need to bring somebody in who does this all day. What are those conversations like? And what were some of the first ones you remember having?
I'm trying to think about any like creative friction moments when per that example, and I'm sure that it's happened before, but I think in general people are very open to getting more hands and more help because we make a lot of stuff. So I can't immediately think of any friction. I think when it comes to deciding to expand the team, we look at it from various different perspectives. I mean, our COO, Jacob Moncrief, is amazing at what he does. Our president, Brian Flanagan's amazing. The three of us kind of touch everything that we do. And so, like, we're each bringing our own perspective to the conversation, but we're very we don't just add people at random. There's a number of boring things that have to be looked at.
Let's get into the boring, baby.
Well, I mean, and I feel so bad for the both of them because I always call everything they do boring, which is like not fair to them. But I'm always like, put me in the creative meetings. Don't put me in the boring meetings. And by that, I mean the business finance meetings. But that's really what it is like when we're looking at a team, we go, okay, what's the content on their plate? What new events do we have coming up that are going to require more? Is this something that can be freelanced for a certain period of time? We're very big into, like I said, we have over 100 full-time employees. We're extremely into full-time team members. We don't have any permalance people because what I said about being a culture fit and this like this curiosity and this, it's also like a passion for what you do and what you make. And so sometimes we'll have team members that touch a few different things because that is their desire to do that. And we're always constantly weighing, okay, this team brought on this freelance help for this amount of time. And if we look at this overtime, it actually equates to a full-time role in this way, or it doesn't equate to a full-time role. But if we take this freelance time, we take this freelance time, it does equate to a full-time role of someone who wants to both produce and edit, or that's what it equates to. We also have this producer editor over here who has told us that they'd like to do more producing than editing. Great. Let's give them this producing, and then we'll take that editing and pair it up with this editing, and now we need to hire a full-time editor. So it's constantly those types of conversations. Or I think Rhett and Link are really great in investing in our future. So we have a whole side of the studio. We have a few different buildings here, but we have a whole side of the studio that we started leasing kind of before we had much to even put over there. And I remember that conversation with them, and I was like, what are you guys doing? Like, we can't, why do we need a whole other huge studio when we have this one? And then immediately when we were finished doing it, we staffed the writer's room for a buddy system in there. We bought Smosh and moved them in there. And then all of a sudden I was like, oh gosh, we need another one of these. So it's kind of that analyzation of what's needed and when and where. But we very much like everyone to have their hands in different things and not to be, we like being exactly rightly staffed. We don't like being understaffed or overstaffed. So it's kind of that math of feeling out what we're making, what's upcoming, how everyone's feeling, etc.
I would also love to know how you find on-camera talent from this pool of employees. Something you described in that interview with Jack, which I'll be sure to link in the episode description, is how you will often find a sort of like creative spark that you will nurture out of people who have a given role, like your chef Josh, who was brought on initially as a culinary producer and then ultimately hosts and in some ways like eclipses fame, I'm sure, for certain demographics and people of Rhett and Link themselves for the Mythical Kitchen franchise. So how do you find people who will be good on camera? And is it easier or harder than a traditional casting process?
I think there's multiple different ways. I think the great thing about the Mythical Chef Josh example is that when things can be as authentic and organic as possible, they are as authentic and organic as possible. So in other words, like I always say, the reason that we have fans that like to watch us every day is because behind the camera, we have an awesome crew that they also want to be friends with and a part of. And so the authenticity of that travels through the lens to the other side so that like the mythical crew is connected to the mythical beasts in that particular way. And of course, Rhett and Link have something to do with it, but I really do believe in that authentic connection. So with somebody like Mythical Chef Josh, I'd love if a fan listening could put together an evolution of Josh on camera, but he started with us behind the scenes producing culinary content, popped him onto a Good Mythical More, and then started not even purposefully necessarily seeding him into other content. Food is our number one vertical, so we knew that we had the desire to spin off even more food content, but not to invest in food content within Good Mythical Morning, back to the evolve or die of it all. And so then we came up with a series of sub-series to pilot on the Good Mythical Morning channel to see how Josh would do on camera in that capacity and how people would relate to him and consume the content. And then from that, piloting of sub-series is when we decided to make the full channel spinoff. And then I think the Mythical Kitcheneers that are around him, both behind the scenes and on camera, are really great examples of that exact same thing, where we were looking for culinary producers that had the skill set to be a part of the Good Mythical Morning team, but also the desire to, not even the desire to be on camera, the willingness to be on camera in an authentic capacity. Okay. And that's kind of how that comes about. We have other talent that's on camera that are writers and producers. it's often the comedy writers are also comedians in a lot of ways, so that like one-to-one works out nicely. And then we have talent that joins us for different series that we've casted in various different ways, or they have been a part of the crew behind the scenes, and then they've transferred into more on-screen talent. And then we have on-screen talent who came up through that authentic path and now has taken over on the Smosh side of things. And now we share talent with Smosh, which is something that I would never have thought would be the case. So it's kind of every which way. But I think the authenticity of that shines through into the content, and that's the real point.
You're helping me realize that one thing I really enjoy about Mythical's content and why they're one of the few channels and families of creative work that I am still watching 15 years after I started is because the crew is more visible and referred to and like tangibly a part of the finished product than average. Does that strike you as true, or am I just kind of coming to a false conclusion?
No, I think that we very consciously did that from early on. I think it's something as silly as hearing my laugh wasn't a calculated thing, but at a certain point early on, it was like, why am I holding, it's like me and the camera guy in here with Rhett Link, and I'm holding my laughter for what? Like, why would I do that? That seems so weird. And so then I was like, I'm not gonna laugh. And now it's become part of the thing that like it's like a natural laugh track that happens. And then from that it really is like, well, why don't like Rhett Link talk to the crew and the early days of Good Mythical Morning where I didn't have a mic, like you would sometimes hear me off camera. They refer to me, and then we kind of evolved it into what it is now. That's been I think the most fun that the three of us have had making the show. But yeah, that was. I think it was a initially not a conscious choice, but then back to the rule breaking of it all. It's like, why? And sometimes when we go shoot for other shows, it's funny depending on if the people are fans or not, or like what the atmosphere is like. My like laugh don't laugh filter is a little funky because I'm like, okay, I know that the guys want me to laugh at them, but like I'm in this atmosphere where I'm uncertain if this show allows laughter, but anyway, they get laughter whether they like it or not.
How has your relationship to being perceived, to being on camera, to being a person who is known by the audience changed over time? Where's it at right now?
Yeah, I'm not like, that's not my, it really used to not be my thing. I think now it's the dynamic that I think Rhett Link and I are enjoying about Good Mythical Morning is that we've found that in order for Rhett Link to be their funniest as performers, it's best if they are set up in a situation in which they can just react and not retain any information. So and this is something that I think that if you were a mythical beast, you wouldn't, it's hard to see transform, but we very consciously moved any of the ownership of information, of structure, of instruction to me. And so Rhett and Link are allowed to play and have fun and enjoy each other and react to scenarios they're put in. And that's been working really nicely. So
it's like them against the show in a way. It's like, the show as led by you, the producer, and backed by the rest of the crew with them almost like contentiously in a way that when you phrase it that way makes, for example, your acquisition and part of Hot Ones, like make all the sense in the world.
Yeah, I think that's the dynamic that we enjoy that's working for us right now is like the guys get to have fun in a structure that's created for them, and then I get to create the structure along with the team, which is where my comfort is. So I think that back and forth makes a lot of sense.
How much feedback do you personally consume about yourself online?
I have learned where and when to look for the most part. So I'm a consumer of comments mostly when I am not on camera in that particular piece. They'll take shots at you even if you aren't on camera. It's one of those things, and everybody has said it, but like there's a million nice comments, there's one mean comment, and your brain is just like the mean one that doesn't make any sense. That's the one.
Because you puzzle it over and you're like, why is it this? Why is that your attack?
Yeah. So I try to find a nice balance. I will tell you, I have not Googled myself in over a decade because there was that point where I realized, this is not. I cannot. This is There's going to be stuff when I Google myself. I also find, we have a lot of female talent that gets so much more hate and opinions than the male talent that we have on the show. And so I always try and, take that with a grain of salt. And also, there's so many people that love Rhett Link so much, and there's a portion of the fan base that does not want to hear or see anyone else. And the interesting thing is, like, they wouldn't be seeing Rhett Link if we didn't exist.
Yeah.
But, there's that portion of the audience. And then also we have a very broad middle America, Southern, coastal, everywhere audience. And so sometimes there's a disconnect between, we're not a political show at all. We're evergreen and we try and avoid that type of stuff. But if you pay attention to who we donate our money to and where our values lie, it's pretty obvious. And I am an out lesbian, and we talk about that on the show a lot. And we've been doing major pride campaigns for the past several years. And yet still, when we come out with our pride collection of the year, you get that stuff in the comment section. So, it's an interesting headspace to be in. And I'm sure, Hank is another person I know you've talked to that like has this experience of being, a performer in front of the camera, meaning one thing to the audience, and then behind the scenes having to be an executive and make those types of decisions, and the kind of compartmentalization of each one of your particular roles, and wanting to look at the comments because it informs the content that you're making, but not wanting to look because if someone says something rude about the way you identify or look or whatever. So it's an evolving relationship that I have with the comments, but I think I'm very secure in what my role is on the show and what my role is at Mythical and what my role is in the broader internet entertainment landscape. So, haters gonna hate, but...
What infrastructure or safeguards do you have in place for talent in terms of like moderation or preparing talent, particularly talent that are marginalized or multiply marginalized from that kind of like broad internet audience that is going to involve some amount of like incredibly personal and specific hate?
We've had to figure it out along the way for sure. I think that where the rub was happening is in those cases where a producer or writer was also on-camera talent and it was their particular episode or their piece that they were doing. And so, again, you have this rub of, I am a maker of this thing. I want to see, how this content was received, but I'm also a face in it. And that's when we started going, all right, that's not your assignment anymore. Like, do not cross-pollinate those two things. And then I think the newer talent that we bring on, I try and have particularly the women, I try and have a discussion with them coming from the place that I'm coming from and my experience in this industry for so long, and what has helped me and my mental health. And then at a certain point, you give them all the tools they can use and you tell them not to look in certain places, and depending on the person, they'll do it anyway. And at that point it's like, okay, we're here for you if you need us. If you don't want to do this anymore, if you don't want to do that anymore, whatever it is, like the open conversation. If there's a joke that you said in the long form episode and we export it to short form and you're getting a lot of hate on that particular joke, text me and email me, and we'll take the whole thing down. And so that's kind of the, where we've landed with all of that. And then, we really try and look out for all of our crew and all of our talent and try and shield and protect them from the world as much as possible. Although I'll say our community is the best community ever. Like, really, when you look at like the core fandom or the members of the Mythical Society or the people who like will actually congregate around our content and talk about it on a every hourly basis, like, they're really awesome, supportive people. So I do feel great about the big community that we've built. It's just those those casual bucket fans that tend to say really mean things and make people cry sometimes.
You have to spend a lot of energy on a small number of people that have an outsized impact a lot of the time.
Yeah.
So continuing this, like, zooming out for the back portion of this interview, I would love to know, and I can't exactly phrase this question particularly well, but I feel like I have a sort of like informal society of women CCOs, COOs, CFOs whose job has been wrangling like either man baby bosses or like these days, like, zany zennial, like on-screen personalities. And I think some of that is real. I think some of that is a sort of like pink collar gendered assumptions about what women do behind the scenes in entertainment, assuming that we are kind of like related to casting or talent management or more sort of like emotional roles, which like some of us are, and that's interesting. So I wonder if you have reckoned with or would like to talk about just your experience as a woman executive who is also sort of like longest serving employee to two like BFF guys from their childhoods who are a bit older than you.
Yeah. I think very early on what we realized is that they were hiring me to produce them as talent. And that was the relationship. And I think when we are in that mode, those boundaries are really respected. So when I'm coming in as a producer and they are acting as talent, the lines are extremely clear. Now, they're also the CEOs of Mythical and the co-founders of Mythical. So our creative relationship, which is extremely intimate, has evolved over time as well. And so you kind of, they have that respect of me. Ultimately, they are the shot callers. They're the only ones above me when it comes to everything that we make. And there's very rarely any time where we don't collectively agree on a shot that's being called. But in those very few moments over the past 13 years, there have been those moments. I think that managing people is by far the hardest thing that I do, period. And I'm not really talking about Rhett and Link.
You produce them and you know how to do that.
Yeah. But I also think that I was in the habit of calling a lot of what I do when I manage people as calling it babysitting. And I don't think that's fair. I think that people often feel that way because there's so many frustrating aspects of managing people. But when it comes to Rhett and Link and like the grown man babies versus the female producer, truly a lot of that's entertaining show. And, the moments where I'm talent and they are talent, I think that comes out a lot too, because it's just a dynamic that we can play up. But at the end of the day, that's not the case. And I am very grateful that they are not the Gen Z rogue don't want to get out of the bed in the morning creator types that I've heard so much about. They are grown-ass men that come to work every day and run a media empire. So I don't have to babysit them.
I'm very glad to hear that for you, and also as a person who consumes this content, doesn't want to pierce the bubble quite so much. I wonder too, how do you approach like upskilling yourself as you've gone from producing a show to like managing huge teams and managing a company in many ways? What do you think makes a good leader, manager? How have you learned to do that? How do you train others to do it?
This is a place where I'm really trying. I think that you've heard from other people, other creators, that like they never set out to be CEOs or to manage people. They just set out to make content. And in a lot of ways, I think I'm in that same boat where I describe myself as a producer because that's what I want to do is make content. And then, if you pull out and you look at our org chart, for example, you can't look at it on one computer screen. There's so many different branches and so many things that have shifted. And, not only do I oversee the SVP of content, but the SVP of design and the SVP of audience development, but also the senior director of special projects and events, and also interface with the VP of e-commerce. There's so many different branches of things. I think that what I had a tendency to do, and I'm working on, is center the work more than anything else. And what I've learned is that it's not only about the product, it's about the people who make the product and the journey of getting to that end production of the product, launch of the product.
So like the final product doesn't always justify kind of how we got there or how someone feels about it, or not even justify, but like the final, the thing that is best objectively for content is not always the right way to go.
Yeah. 1000%. I think that if you have a great final product and you went through hell to get there, then this wasn't a success. And I'm not saying that anything's going through hell here, but I do think that like what I've had to do is really prioritize the person behind. My SVP of design is an awesome designer who oversees a team of 6 people, and he does in-program, in-video design. He does all of our marketing design, all of our key art design, all of our e-commerce design, and we are juggling, and that's just one of my reports of the 6. And so he's juggling a lot, and he's juggling it under me, who's juggling 5 other people that have that same amount of juggling. And if I don't prioritize in our weekly one-on-ones, the first thing out of my mouth isn't how are you doing? How are you feeling? Where are you feeling stress? How are you doing with your reports? What is too much? Like, if that's not the use of our one-on-one time, then I've failed as a manager. And I think that where I've tried to push myself is like, if we were having this conversation a few years ago, my one-on-ones would have been like, give me an update on this product launch. Give me an update on where this key art's at. Give me and that's not what managers should do with their one-on-one time. So I think that that's an example of that. I still am the person at the end of the day that feels the most responsible for the final product on the creative side. And we release something on mythical.com weekly. We have a weekly drop. So to have a weekly drop there, multiple videos, we have every single day, people on YouTube alone view 600 hours worth of our content. And I'll tell you, I feel every single hour of that because ultimately I feel responsible for how our creative is reflected everywhere.
Everything's creative at a creative company.
Yeah. But it pains me the most, not when a piece of content that I think is good isn't well received, but when one of my reports is having a bad time or not in a good place or not feeling supportive. Like, that is a dagger for me. And so, yeah, I'm just working hard to make sure that the product and the people are, are treated more equally, and or people are edging out the product in terms of prioritization.
I have also struggled with like the right metaphor to talk about managing people. I like to manage people. I think a good manager can be really healing. Like, I said it a little bit jokingly in therapy this week of like, I'm kind of like reparenting, self-parenting my inner child via being the kind of manager that I wish I had. And I think that's real. Like, I think I'm not a parent and not going to be a parent, but the like things I hear and read about parenting feel closer to it. And maybe instead of parenting, that implies a, like relational hierarchy that I don't think is totally right. Maybe it's about farming, another of my interests, which is like farmers grow soil and they don't grow crops. Like, crops are the byproduct of healthy soil. And I think good creative work is the byproduct of a healthy, plugged in, functional, well-paid, excited, engaged, supported workforce, in a way that's the best metaphor I've got so far. So I offer that to you if that is helpful.
I like that. I did not know that about farmers and soil, but I will keep that now, and I will think about farmers in relation to their soil moving forward.
Couple more questions for you. First, what is your relationship like to the work of your peers on YouTube? And I know I kind of jokingly referred earlier to like the dog years of digital media career, but I talked about this with Hank, where like Complexly is a legacy digital media brand. Like again, just the lifetime of the medium, so is Mythical. And so I wonder if thinking about yourselves as folks who have like survived and grown through a relatively very long period of time, you've literally bought and sold competitors that are now colleagues. How do you feel about like the industry as a whole, watching what your colleagues and, maybe you think of them as competitors are doing? And just generally, like, when you tell people you work on YouTube in large part in 2025 and people are like, oh, how do you respond to that?
I mean, I do try and keep up as much as possible with the content that's being produced. That being said, there's so many creators now. There's so much content. There's so many different platforms. I personally love TikTok. I think that's my favorite algorithm and also my favorite place to find talent. But I also have been learning about that talent, that sometimes that short form to long form isn't a thing, and it's really hard to do. But I try and make myself aware of what's going on. Now, I'll say, because YouTube skews more young male, I wouldn't. There's not a lot of competitors that I identify for us, because the content has a very different flavor than the type of content that we're making. When we are, when the guys are standing on stage with Sean Evans, when we're talking about like the chicken shop dates of the world and all of those shows, I still don't see any of them as competitors. Also, like you mentioned, we own a piece of First We Feast at this point, but I see them as like building up the idea of premium television content on YouTube. So I want more of those programs and things to exist. But I think it's interesting, the things that have changed and the things that have stayed the same. We have over 2,800 episodes of Good Mythical Morning. There was a time where if someone did something that we did on the show, there were a limited amount of creators making that type of work where we would be able to say, hey,
don't copy our segment.
Copied what we did. At this point, copying other people is what a lot of these YouTubers do. And if you were to copy something that we did, well, I mean, good luck not copying something that we've done because we've done so many things. So I'm kind of edging around all of your question, but I'm just saying there's a lot of content like that out there that I honestly throw away because, in my opinion, if you're copying other people or you're playing on a trend that's been done a million times, or if you're, I'm not going to name specific tropes, but like, you're going to be gone in a moment. You're not going to be here anymore. There's a reason that creators have lasted throughout time, and it's not because they're copying other people's ideas. I'm not really fully answering, I guess, what you're saying.
Okay.
But Smosh, for instance, I think Smosh is a really interesting story because there was a period of time where it was Anthony and Ian and I, and honestly, me more than Rhett and Link, I saw them as competitive. And I was like, there's these two male duos on YouTube. And I was like, I don't like that. I just want there to be one. And I had all of these ideas about who Smosh was. And then they'd made a brilliant transition from the two of them to this ensemble cast. And I still had an idea of who I thought they were. And then we bought them and we worked with them for a period of time, and it completely changed who I thought they were, and made me look at their content in a completely different light.
Did you think it was a bad idea when Mythical acquired Smosh?
No, that's exactly the type of decision that is not made without me in the conversation. I knew immediely that was a good decision, and it was also because they really needed it.
Yeah.
They needed a home, and I knew that we could give them the best home that anyone could give them. And I think their evolution, I don't think that story could have been any better with Anthony coming back into the fold. But where I really admire them is all of the, we were really big on the unscripted pit side of things and going, this is where it's at, guys. You can make more of this. You're doing so well over here. Your ensemble cast is awesome. And now that's like their number one thing is the Smosh Pit channel and that whole cast. And so I've gone from those two guys, no, there could only be two guys, not four, to, oh, wow, they're not, that's not what I thought the content was, to, oh my God, they're actually making really funny stuff and their casting is on point. And like, there's so many things that I admire about that, that evolution of Smosh. So to bring it all back around, I try and watch as much as I can. I try and be aware as much as I can. We have a whole ventures arm, so we are investing in a lot of different creators, and I'm a big part of that conversation. So there's creators being tossed at me constantly, but I don't think we have any competitors. In fact, I want more televisual premium content to be being made on the platform.
Hell yeah. Do you own any percentage of Mythical as employee number 2 and longest serving employee?
Yes.
Right on. I think more people should.
I don't know. I've never been. I've never been asked that question before. I mean, I think that I'll say I'm also not the only one, and I'll say it's because Rhett and Link have been generous, and also they give credit where credit is due, and I think that's a big part of it. So, I've never been asked that question, but it's I think you're right. I think it is important. I think it's representative of what we've built together, and then what the extended team has built together. So, I think that people should be rewarded in that way.
Hell yes. And is there anything that you wish people would ask you about your job, about the day-to-day, week-to-week, the things you do, the things that you would say in theory in an annual review if you had those at work?
Believe me, we have a lot of reviews at work. We got all kinds of reviews. We got quarterly reviews. We got surveys. We got mid-year reviews. We got end-of-year reviews. We are big on reviews.
I gotta tell you, my favorite is the biannual. We'll do a July and a November. That way we're like thinking thinking about next year before the sort of like holiday slump takes over. I love it. I love a July and a November review.
Oh, we're very big into feedback. We're very big into self-review and reflection and feedback. That I've found to be transformative, because if you review yourself before your manager reviews you, you're kind of seeing like the writing on the wall of like, if I think this, and I'm pretty sure my manager thinks this. So I've found that to be really helpful, and like that formalization of like, this is when we are giving each other major feedback. And it goes both ways. That's the other thing is like, please give me feedback. What do I wish that somebody's asked me? I don't know if I have that. I think going back to the kind of compartmentalization of my role, I think it works to a certain extent. I think that I'm very happy to have, we went on tour this past summer and had 11 sold out shows, and each one of those shows I had a meet and greet at with 150 fans that came through, and like having that relationship and being asked the questions in that, particular line of what my role is as a performer producer, and then turning around and having the more executive conversations. Like I think I get the questions from both sides, and I'm fine. If you want to think that my days look like shooting an episode of Good Mythical Morning and having a good time, that's totally cool. And if you want to think that it's filled with meetings, that's totally cool. And there's not really anything you missed, I don't think.
Stevie, my feedback for you is you seem like a great manager, and you've been a great interview. So thank you very much for taking the time.
You. I appreciate it.
If folks are not familiar with Mythical and your universe of stuff you make online, where should they dive in?
You can watch Good Mythical Morning Monday through Friday at youtube.com/Good Mythical Morning. You can watch Last Meals, which is our other flagship food interview celebrity show, on our Mythical Kitchen channel, which is on YouTube at Mythical Kitchen. You can watch our absurdist docu-comedy show Rhett Link's Wonder Hole on the original Rhett Link channel on YouTube at Rhett Link. And there's a million other things that you can watch, but I think that'll be a nice entry point. Although this is a podcast.
It is.
We do have a bunch of podcasts that you can also listen to.
You sure do.
Ear Biscuits, A Hot Dog's a Sandwich, Dispatches from Myrtle Beach. Or if you want to listen to my podcast, which I canceled, you can listen to that as well. It's Best Friends Back All Right. And
if folks want to follow you and your active Instagram, where you're always camping and then taking photos of the camp stove with your ring light, your external flash, how can folks follow you personally?
Everywhere at Stevie W. Levine.
Stevie Levine, thank you again.
Thanks for having me.
Attach Your Resume is created and hosted by Eric Silver and Amanda McLaughlin. It's produced by Brandon Grugel, edited by Misha Stanton, and our cover art is by Shay McMullen. We are a production of the Multitude Podcast Collective and Studio. If you like the show and want to learn more about how Multitude helps creators make a living, follow us on social at Multitude Shows or visit multitudeshows.com.